Howdy peeps, welcome to what is a, well, typical British summer day. It's peeing down with rain, grey, chilly. So I thought, how best to warm up? Well, I thought I'll do a how I do video. And today we're going to look at soldering photo etch. Now this is not necessarily something you'll come across regularly as a modeller, although it is a useful skill to have because there are certain times when it is just the best option. Mainly if you find yourself having to fold things like toolboxes on a Panzer 2, Panzer 3, where it's one piece of etch and you fold the sides up, fold the front and back up and then fold the lid over. That's a bit of a pig to try and glue it using CA and make it look like a solid toolbox without having any gaps or big chunks of CA dripping down the sides. It's a lot easier with solder. Anyway, let's get started. First thing we're going to need is obviously a soldering iron. Now unhook the wires. I use what is a little special. Wasn't that expensive. I got it last year, I think, to replace my old Weller that I had since college that managed to burn itself out eventually. You don't need a soldering station with like the drawer with all the bits in and blah blah. All you need is the soldering iron and something to hold it in. That's a very important thing because a lot of them come with a circular grip, which is okay if you've got a station like that to jam it into. When you've got to put it down on the bench, they tend to roll, and they always tend to roll into something that you don't want them to, normally your arm or something flammable or plastic. So there will be some health warnings in this video. More do as I say than do as I do, because I tend to we're dealing with hot tools, in the case of a gas iron, which I'll show in a minute, fire, molten metal, acid, fumes, all sorts of potential for injuries. So one of the other things I also always make sure I have, a mug of clean cold water. Well, that's not particularly clean, but you know what I mean. That's just my decal mug. So that if you do burn yourself, because sometimes it's not instantly obvious you've burnt yourself because it gets that hot, it just cauterises, but then you can dunk your finger straight into there. Anyway, this one is on a off switch, it's temperature controllable. I tend to run it fairly full, set about 450 degrees C at the moment, which you don't want to be touching. The other type of iron you find, and so it's a semi-pricey one, ranges from my days racing radio control cars and having to do soldering out sometimes literally in a field, is one of these, which is a butane gas soldering iron reservoir. Basically the whole handle is just runs off lighter gas. On off switch you can hear the gas, maybe. Lighter. Let's see if we... And soon gets red hot. As you can see, the gore's already red hot. I'll switch that off because we don't want to be using that one today. And yes, you should leave it a while before you put it back in the case. I'm just putting it in with the tip out so I don't melt the case or set fire to the house. We'll put that to one side. It's not got that hot and it will cool down fairly quickly, but again, it's a risk. Not, if you don't have to take the risk, don't take it. What other tools and pieces are we going to need? First thing, and probably most important thing, eye protection, because no matter what you're using, sometimes the flux or the solder can spit, and trust me, that really stings, even if it just hits you on the cheeks. But if you've not got anything covering your eyes, yeah, you don't want to know what getting red hot acid in your eye or red hot molten metal is. The other one, although you can't see, I am wearing denim-ish anyway, cargo shorts to cover my legs. I got into a bad habit several years ago of, instead of cleaning the soldering iron off in the nice cool damp sponge, because my old iron I didn't have a sponge for, I would literally just flick it and flick any excess solder off the tip. And you're right, I was soldering in boxer shorts, and that really does hurt. Molten metal on your leg, eek, not fun. So yeah, eye protection. For the purposes of this video, I should be wearing my glasses. Again, do as I say, not as I do. If you've got goggles, safety goggles, whatever, safety squints, wear them. Obviously a surface to work on. Now we're not going to solder onto the cutting mat for what I would assume would be obvious reasons. It'll melt. So we need something to actually do our work on. Now what could be a better idea, oh, he says smacking into the soldering iron, than a nice big metal anvil. Well, small metal anvil in this case, a little jeweler's anvil. You think, great, you know, that's heat proof, that's a really bad idea. The heat soak and the heat sink effect of that will make it virtually impossible to solder on. It will just suck all the heat straight out of the iron. Instead, what I use, as I nearly singed my arm hair on the heat coming off, just an old bit of balsa wood. Nothing, I mean, you can see it's got a few singe marks on it. But yeah, that's it. Just a piece of balsa wood. It doesn't conduct a heat. And I forgot to grab any. I won't necessarily be needing them for this video, but drawing pins. If you're trying to line things up, or you've got a flat part and then you've got to solder something like 90 degrees to it, a couple of drawing pins to hold the flat part into the balsa wood, so you haven't got to worry about that moving, is a good idea as well. And we're looking at other various hand tools and stuff we might need. Well, obviously a knife to cut the etch from the sprue, file to clean up the etch if we need to on any joints, and something as well to clean any tarnishing, burnishing, dust, gunk, grease off of the surface of the etch. Now, as you may notice, sometimes once you've had a piece of etch out for a few days, rather than being the bright colour that this is actually going dull now already, but you can already see if I hold it up close and it doesn't glare out, it's starting to tarnish, and that will stop you, and obviously fingerprint grease as well, will stop you getting a decent solder joint. So we need to clean that off as well. So cotton wool bud and a bit of, I generally use a bit of either Ultimate airbrush cleaner or thinner or whatever other solvent acetone you happen to have kicking about, and maybe a, let's find a cleanish looking one, that one will do, a sander with a nice fine grit as well, so you don't just scratch your bejesus out of the photo etch. Again, just to give yourself a good key surface. Get that away from there before it catches fire. Next we're going to need solder. Now that comes in a couple of different forms. I've got this stuff, which I think came with the gas iron. This stuff I've had since I was at college. Which, I mean, you can tell how old it is. It says blah 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 blah. Avoid inhaling fumes. Wash hands after use before eating, drinking or smoking. Yeah, you're not going to get a warning about that anymore, are you? But the other one is what is known as solder paste. Now this is basically a mix of solder filings and flux, which is an acid paste. It cleans, as acid tends to do. I'll show both ways. If you can get hold of solder paste, I mean, you can get it on Amazon. It's the easier one to work with. You can almost use it as a glue to hold the parts in place and then apply the heat. Other things that can be helpful, especially now for cleaning the parts up before, the old fiberglass pen. We're going to need a pair of tweezers, because you don't, even if the soldering iron is only touching the edge for a couple of seconds, you do not want to be holding it. Otherwise you will end up with cauterized fingertips. As I was showing you the flux, I don't even know if this has been opened. Yeah. Almost looks like Vaseline, just don't confuse the two. Because that could lead to some nasty, nasty things. And just a pair of pliers as well to bend any edge that I need. So, where to start? The iron's been plugged in a while, it's up to temperature. So let's move all the tooly bits out of the way, and we'll start off with the most usual way, which is with the actual solder. So I've got these two parts here left over from the Meng D9R, so I shall just, not worried about being gentle or accurate here really. We're just trying to show how to do it. Just in case, because they are the joining edges, we shall make sure we get rid of the little nub that's left behind, so we've got a nice flat edge to solder onto. Also has the bonus effect of actually cleaning up the edges. Normally to bend this I would use my pliers or a photo-etched bending tool, but we'll do it by hand just for now. As luck would have it, it's actually gone correctly to shape. So what we have is a straight piece, and on one of these sides we have a joint. Sometimes not the easiest thing to do with glue. So what we do is we bend it out again, because I forgot to clean it properly. Here's where I will use my fiberglass pen. I know this is fairly clean. I'll just give it a little scuff over, just to remove any surface tarnishing on both sides of the join. And for once my hands are relatively grease free, so I should be okay. So we've cleaned up the joint. Fold it back up. I should really have done that before I folded it, but there we go. Right, so we have our piece of etch that needs soldering. Remember, yeah, I know it should be square, but we're not worried about that right now. Now, using a cocktail stick and flux, I'll just scrape a bit out of the lid. We really don't need much. This stuff does tend to spit and boil and do all sorts of nasties. We'll just run a bit, open it back up a little. Yeah. Just run a little bit along the edge of the joint, both sides. I forget what kind of acid this is, but yeah, you don't want it in your eyes or anything. And it will spit when it gets hot, which is going to very shortly. Now I've managed to bend this back out of shape again, so just a little more adjustment. There we go, we're back into shape. Might be an idea to zoom you in a little for this bit, just so you can see what I'm doing, if I can keep my donkey hands out of the way. Now we have our, this is a resin cord solder, or flux cord solder. I don't necessarily trust the flux in it, especially as this solder's 20 odd years old. Put a little extra out. What you are looking for though, I will say, is, although it doesn't actually say it on here, is a 60-40, so 60% lead, 40% tin. The lead free solder, yes, it is safer and healthier, blah blah, because it hasn't got lead in, but for the amount of soldering that we do, the health risk is so minimal as to, if you're standing outside and a car that's running on leaded petrol runs past, you're going to inhale more lead. Let's put it that way. It's not a health issue in these quantities. So taking our iron, we can see the tip is all dull and you can already see the spitting and the sparks and the fumes coming off. And you see molten metal already. So we just pre-tin the tip with a bit of solder, he says. Come on, there we go. Then give it a wipe off on our sponge, which is damp. Hey presto, nice and shiny. I'll try and do this in shot without getting my head in or hands too much in the way. This is also one of those jobs where you kind of need three hands. We touch the iron to the piece and literally just run the solder down the inside. Blow the smoke out of the way, wipe the tip off, put the iron back away safely in the sand so we're safe from it. And because this is going to be surprisingly hot, as you'll see from the colour change, you can see it's completely changed colour, the edge. But you can also see we've got a nice solder joint. If I can get it real close and focus. Are you going to focus there? Maybe. If I hold it close to my hand it will. There we go. You can see we've got a good solder joint running down that edge, which will be nice and strong. Won't be prone to flicking apart like it would if it was just super glue. And from there, obviously, just super glue it to the model. So that's the old-fashioned method, using a cord solder. No, that's why. I was wondering why it wouldn't go back into the pot again. It's clipped. Now we'll do the same thing but using the more modern technique, which is the solder flux, or solder paste, sorry. So again we shall chop our part off. We will just realise I'm still zoomed in, so I'll move so I'm under the camera shot. Just quickly remove the tabs. I'll move that out of the way, I'm about there. Again, using the fiberglass pen, clean it up. You might be able to, you should be able to see the difference between the tarnished and the clean. He says you can see one bit's shinier than the rest. So there we go, that's that clean. We'll shut that up because again, another safety thing, you don't want fiberglass getting into your fingers because that really is an itchy bitch to get out. Right. So what we shall do now, we've cleaned that up again. He says making sure we're back in shot. Fold it back into shape. Now we take our solder paste. As you can see, is a dull grey paste. It is literally a mix of pretty much just solder filings and flux. Get Do it in shot might be a better idea. Let's get a bit on our cocktail stick. Don't want too much. And just run it up the joint. It might not want to stay there too well, but you can see some squeezing through. We'll add a bit on the outside just to make sure we get a good joint. Again, clean it off because there is I think it might be hydrofluoric acid, I can't remember. It's not hydrochloric, but it's not something pleasant. I mean, it's only a weak version, but still. And we bring our part back into shot. And this time, just give the iron another wipe off, so we've got a nice shiny tip to hold the part with the tweezers. And pretty much as soon as we touch this, you'll see the solder melt, or the paste, and that is that part soldered. I'll bring it up again. And you can see we had a far shorter contact, far less preparation to actually get it done, and just a good joint at the end. Very minimal cleanup required on that. As you can see, it's cooled down already. And to clean up the excess on the outside, we just run the file over it a few times, or a sanding stick, it doesn't matter which, because solder is such a soft metal. And yeah, in shot. Obviously, if you were going to do it on the actual model, you'd spend longer cleaning it up, but so that is ready to be glued onto your kit. But there is one other good thing with the solder paste. You notice how regularly you'll build a kit and they want you to attach two parts of etch, normally at right angles to each other, with just a butt joint. So there's a vertical plane, so you've literally only got that surface holding it, and they break off all the time. So again, we're going to have to go with a couple of fairly small pieces. It's not one of those things you tend to have a lot of large bits of etch left over. These are just parts off of a Dragon Sherman. And I've cut them off completely out of shot. There we go. Tiny little bits. I can't even pick them up because my hands are so degunged. Right, so I'll pop that one on there. If I had thought to grab my drawing pins, and I don't actually know where they are, I would pin that one into place. But what we want to do is a butt joint. Now if we do this with a soldering iron, we get a much stronger joint than if we were to try to do it with the traditional means of super glue or clear varnish or PVA or whatever it is your choice to use. So again, we just clean up the edge. Wrong way. Give that a quick scrub over with the fiberglass pen, just to get a clean area for it to attach to. I'll throw that bit of solder in a minute. As you can probably see there, slight melt marks on the cutting mat, which is why I used my old one, not my shiny clean one I normally use. And if we grab this, again, we don't need much. This stuff goes a long way. It's quite expensive really for a pot, and you don't get an awful lot in a pot. but it does go a long way, so it's not something you're going to be needing to replace every couple of weeks or whatever. And we just add the solder paste to the bit we want to solder, which in this case is rather fiddly. I could have probably chosen a better piece to use. Again, wipe off the excess. Now the thing with the solder flux, or solder paste, I keep wanting to say flux because I'm old fashioned. I learned how to solder at college. The thing with the flux is it will support that piece vertically in place. We're not having to hold it there and then put the glue on and then hold it for another 30 seconds or so for the glue to set. What we will do though is, as we apply the heat, we will just hold it with the tweezers. Did I get that? Yes, I did. As that's all the soldering I'm going to do, I'm going to turn that off. Now you'll see, once we detack it from there, that's really small. But as you can see, we've got a 90-degree butt joint soldered on. Again, I didn't exactly take my time and do it carefully, but that's going to be a much stronger joint than if you were using just CA glue across that edge. Now, that'll pretty much, yep, that's still rather hot. Put that back down on there before I singe my fingers. Now, as I said, soldering can be dangerous, but as long as you take sensible precautions, it's not really that bad. The fumes, yes, they are toxic, but you're not breathing that much of it in. If you've got a window open or whatever, you'll be fine. It's one of these things, it becomes a lot easier with practice. As I said, I studied electronics for 2 years at college, so I got used to soldering. But yeah, have a go, give it a try. If you've got any questions on soldering, I'll be happy to answer them. Just leave them in the thing down below. I'll zoom out again while I'm here. Yeah, see the devastation of my workspace. Yes, any questions or comments or likes or dislikes, leave them below. I say don't forget to like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and tell your mates if you found anything useful on my channel. If you've got any ideas or things you'd like to see, again give me a shout either in the comments or wherever you happen to find me electronically. But for now, that'll do. I shall sign off and say adieu, bon voyage, rock on, have fun and enjoy your modelling. Bye bye.